to be starting a conversation around some of the reports that are due to the legislature, and we're just gonna, kind of one of the overarching goals is to see if there is, so if you want to put your critical thinking cap on around, are there some of these that we don't need anymore? Or are there other ones that we do need? And the process of asking for that, and Frank's already saying, yay, they need more. I'm just kidding. But mostly to look if there is redundancies or, and also if we're producing these reports, might as well take some time to take a look at them. And I don't know that always happens. So they're doing a lot of work around it. And I printed you 4 that of the pretty long list. I wasn't going to print them all. I think I asked for the Kansas Every Child Can Read Act, the tax credit low-income students, you should have that one, the mental health intervention grant, and then research is going to kind of show you the map that came with that one. And then Safe and Secures was one that we were asking for some more funding. That one came out with a big spreadsheet, and I think it's, we can put our eyes on the actual numbers from years past and be able to take a look at that. So with that, I will call Mr. Myers up to just kind of give us his overview, and if we have any questions for Dr. Harwood or Jennifer Light, they are available to us. So today we get to look at some of these reports and start to do some thinking around it. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. So committee, in front of you, there are those reports, but then I've also prepared a table or a list of reports that are required by statute. And this list is structured, so the first page, page 1, are reports that are required to be submitted to the legislature or specific legislative committees. So you can see, and that goes through, there's a gray line there on page 2, and then you'll see where that first part is specific to K-12 education, requiring KSDE, the State Board of Education, to compile a report. The second portion of that you can see is KBOR, the Board of Regents. Those are just on here for reading's sake, just to look at if you have any interest in those. Then there's a couple of legislative post-audit reports that are due, some compact-related reports and other miscellaneous reports that are due to the legislature, and then the blueprint for literacy portion. And I'm going to backtrack and get to just touch on a few of these here in just a second, Mr. Chair and committee members. And then on page 4 and 5, this is a list of kind of other reports that are not necessarily due to be presented to the legislature, but maybe statutes that require publication of certain information, or statutes that require school districts to maybe report to the State Board of Education or to the Department of Education or to other entities. So that's on page 4 and 5 there. But really the reports you're receiving today are based on what is provided on this page 1 and 2 of this summary. And I just wanted to point out a few. I believe in front of you, you've got, which reports do you have in front of you? The tax credit for low-income student scholarship report. And you see that in the 4th line there. So that one is a listed required report there. The State Board of Education is required to report to you, the legislature, on the tax credit for low-income student scholarship program. There's certain reports regarding the accreditation system, the academic achievement, the performance accountability and longitudinal achievement reports that are required to be provided to the legislature and also published on the State Board of Education's website. One that might be a little antiquated is, if you look, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the the fifth one down, the State Board of Education Skills for Success in School Program Report. That is a report that has an ancient committee name in the statute. I'm trying to recall the committee name, but then it still also requires a report to the legislature. And that's really a report on, I mean, essentially at-risk programs and services, but we've got other reports that are dealing with at-risk programs and services. So that one might be a little antiquated and something the committee could take a look at, that KSA 723570 report there. You see there's a bond election report that is to be provided to the legislature. ACT exams, a report on the state-funded ACT exams. This computer science initiative report there in the middle of the page. It is actually, the final report was due January 15. So that is no longer ongoing, but it's still listed there because it was required this year. The one after that, the State Board of Education School Safety and Security Report that goes to the legislature, that is not with regard, I think you've got a printout of the Safety and Security School Grants Program and where those grants are going. This is not the same report. This School and Safety and Security report that you see on here, that's required by 726143, that's actually a report on suspensions, expulsions, things of that nature. So that's what the statute is requiring. That I just wanted to make that distinction, that that is not the account, that money in the safety and security grants account. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, let's see, there's Every Child Can Read Act. I think you guys have a copy of that in front of you right now. There's a required report on emergency safety interventions that's supposed to go to the House and Senate Education Committees. The foster care academic children, or the academic report for foster care children. Of course, the Education Funding Task Force report, and then at the top of page 2 are the reports that are supposed to go directly to this committee. The report on at-risk accountability plans, and then the school district reports under those new at-risk accountability plans, and then the excess costs report for special education that are at an individual school district level. I also want to point out, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, this LPA, if you look on page 3, that legislative post-audit review of the successful schools model, that is due, let's see, they might have already done that. That might be something they've already done, but that might be something that, I don't know, that successful schools model was not really something that ended up being used, I don't recall. So I'll have to check and see if LPA has already done that report there, but might be something to look at to see if that's necessary moving forward. But yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, there's a lot there. Again, it's structured reports to the legislature or legislative committees, and then the final 2 pages are reports by school districts or other entities to various other entities. And I do want to put the caveat out that this is a running list, and it might not include everything. I mean, this was hitting a bunch of statutory search terms for reports, education, school districts, state board. I mean, there were a lot of statutes popping up when I was doing this search, so certainly there might be some stuff that I missed, and I'd be happy to add it to the list going forward or take a further look. But I'd be happy to stand for questions, Mr. Chair.
Representative Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on some of the, first of all, this is comprehensive and amazing. Thank you so much. On some of these, the dates, it just says annually without a date. What does the department translate that to mean? August 1st, July 1st?
Yeah, that's a good, I don't know when they would hit that report. I mean, the statute just says shall annually provide a report. So I don't know when the department actually hits those gets those reports into you, but it is an annual requirement. So they should be doing it annually, or the entity that's designated should be doing it annually.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative McNorton.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these ones that just say go to the legislature, do we know who gets them, who reads them, what they do with them? Any idea at all?
So I think, and hopefully Frank can help me, because they probably, or they
Under
have
the
to
same
submit some of these
thing?
reports to the legislature. I presume that they would submit those reports to the Secretary of the Senate and the Clerk of the House, and that they would be received by the Secretary and the Clerk. And then, I don't know, I mean, certainly you could go ask and to receive those reports, but I don't know how, and I think they're announced on one of the days in session when they receive the reports. I think they're announced on the floor, and to notice the receipt of the reports. So there should be an announcement and some journal entry saying that those reports were received and putting legislators on notice that they are there.
Thank you.
Go to Representative Hill, then I'll come over to you. Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nick, for putting this together. This is, and the methodology you used on this was searching statutes, is that correct? So this is all the statutory, I can't even spit that word out, but statutory required reporting. It would not include things that the state board might require by
Federal law or something like that.
yep.
Yeah, correct, and I appreciate you making that question and then kind of making that point. Yes, these are statutory required reports. If something is required by Kansas statute, if something is required by the Department of Education at the United States Department of Education, I was not focused on those types of reporting requirements. The other thing I did not focus on is sometimes in budget bills, in the appropriations bills, there might be a proviso, some proviso language that says, for example, you have the mental health intervention team report there. And I believe the proviso language requires a report each year based on that proviso language. So I did not go through the budget bill and take a look at what reports were required in there. Probably not too many, such as the mental health program. And I don't even think the school safety and security grants proviso language. Does it require a report, or I don't think it ever has. So that's just a report that KSD went ahead and put together on behalf of your guys' requests.
And for clarity on a budget proviso, is that a 2-year limit, and then that proviso language would fall off as well?
They're only valid for 1 year each year, but then typically that mental health pilot program, the proviso language is kind of maintained itself for a little while, and then it changed, and I think there was reporting requirements in that proviso language itself.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nick. And kind of what I was going to say has already been said, because I noticed on here there's only one spot that mentions U.S. Department of Education. So this is not anything that's required of our department by the feds. And then I think I know the answer to the ones committee specific. Just back to the previous question, there's a Child Death Review Board report that's due annually to the legislature. And when I was looking into where that report was, or if it had ever been presented to a committee, it had not. It was my understanding that when it's required to the legislature, it's just got to hit the speaker's desk and the president's desk. But how about the committees? Is that just an email to the committee secretary as well?
I believe so. Yeah, to the chairperson or the committee secretary. Yeah, and that would be making the report to the committee. Now, I will note there are a few statutes that do say present a report, and I don't have those listed here. And it seemed like on some prior version we did a couple years ago, we had the statutes that required a presentation. But so I could do some further digging on that. But certainly, if I mean, the legislature and the chair of the committee is always willing or always able to kind of request a presentation on a specific report or something like that by an agency.
Oh, no, sure. And our chair on child welfare has done an annual presentation on that Child Death Review Board report, and it's been full of useful information. The LPA review of successful schools, is that the audit of our small, medium, and large size district? Am I thinking the same thing?
I'll have to look. I'll have to look at that real fast to see what that says.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll come back to you on it. Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nick. Do we have any idea of how many of these reports are available online? When I go to Kansas Data Central and it says Kansas Education Reports, are most of these included on the website?
There are certain publication requirements. For example, the academic achievement, performance accountability, longitudinal achievement reports, those are required to be published online. But I don't think there's a publication requirement in a lot of these. Now, certainly the department may have all these available or most of these available online, but I don't think the law specifically requires publication in a lot of these on a website format.
Okay, thank you so much.
Representative Estes.
Thank you. Nick, and I apologize if this turns out to be more of a question for Dr. Harwood than for Nick, but I noticed that some of these seem like they could possibly, the ones going to the State Board of Ed and to the legislature are almost duplicates, and if the same report could be used to each. And for example, on page 1, the 9th down, is the State Board of Ed School Safety and Security Report, which you said was suspensions and expulsions. And then if you turn to page 5, you see School District Student Expulsion Report. Did you get a sense of how many of these are somewhat duplicative?
Well, you're certainly correct, Representative Estes. And a lot of these that you see in the pages 4 and 5 are where school districts are reporting that information on to the state board or the department. And then the law states the department shall compile such reports or uses some language like that and aggregate the reports and then present that compilation to the legislature. So it's kind of in a lot of these cases, it's maybe not a duplication, it's a requirement that the school districts report up to the agency, and then the agency compiles it and pushes it forward.
So when it says State Board of Education, it doesn't necessarily mean it's being given to them, but they're the clearinghouse is the way to look at it.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
It's more like the example I picked from page 5. It's more like State Department of Ed is like the clearinghouse of it. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's presented to their actual Board of Education at their monthly meeting.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
It's a little bit technical, but I guess I was wondering, I mean, State Board of Education, those reports, and then KSDE, I would guess KSDE is making all of those reports. The State Board of Education is probably not. Is there a reason why the language is that way when the actuality is the opposite way?
Oh, statutory language can kind of change between the state board and the department. The state board is the entity that oversees the department, so by directing the State Board of Education to do something, in essence, you're directing the agency to do it as well. But certainly there's some statutes that, as you can tell here, that specifically direct the agency to do something instead of the state board. Just kind of difference in semantics on how that gets put into statute.
Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a little bit more specific, but, and it may go to KSDE. The other day, I thought we were discussing whether or not expulsions and suspensions were being tracked. This safety and security report for expulsions and suspensions, is that still currently being done if we're not tracking, or am I on the wrong?
Well, and the statute's still still valid. So it's requiring a report, a school district level report on those types of matters to the board, and then the board to compile those matters and report on to the legislature.
So there is still data going into that on expulsions and suspensions, but are we keeping track of those? Right? Or I think it's,
We'll reserve them for, we'll invite Dr. Harwood up here in just a minute and let him talk through some of these and maybe where he finds redundancies. And if Representative McDonald does not want her space, I will give it to Representative Estes.
One thing that I would love to see on this list, and I love how comprehensive it is what year some of these got established. And I noticed that some of these, some, like the Ethnic Minority Scholarship got renamed last year, kind of like a cleanup, like if we did keep a report, we should rename it and so on. Thank you.
I would concur around even the expulsions one where you kind of had to clarify that if we need, to make sure the name actually matches what the report's doing, because then when we're searching for it, hopefully if we are, that one had already confused me, so, and I had just started, so I appreciate the clarification. Representative Estes.
I forgot one, that presentation word, a column that tells me which ones should have been presented.
We can work on that.
Thank you very much.
Me and Representative Estes were having a conversation where I'm pretty good at conceptual and she's good at details. So she's helping me out here on the very good details. I mean, just so we know as we're maybe making some recommendations, and this may be a rollover issue and into next year. We'll see what we can do this year. But any other questions for Nick? Representative McDonald.
Not necessarily for Nick, but I would really like to know the state board's or the Department of Ed's opinion about some of these, if they feel like some are a heavier lift comparatively to the benefit we get. I think that would be some good dialogue.
Very much agreed. I think next will be Dr. Harwood, and he can make some comments. And this can be an opening time of kind of opening up this topic formally, and we look at this as we go, and as they, ask their people to examine this, and Nick will kind of redo that list in his spare time, adding some things to it. So if there's no more questions for Nick, I thank you, sir. Thank you for your work. And then we'll invite up Dr. Harwood if he would like to give some comments and maybe stand for a few questions around these reports. Because and one I'll start with the number discrepancy. I remember there was talk of there was 27, and here is kind of the official 17 with maybe some other ones tucked in there. If you can give any clarity to that, and anything else you want to say.
I can. So I'll start with the one that Nick talked about, which is number 4 down, the State Board Skills for Success in Schools program report. So that is buried in what is mostly a deleted at-risk, and it applies to school districts that receive a grant that I don't think it applies anymore. So these school districts that receive the grant have to do the report, but I don't think the grant program is there anymore. So that's not on our list because we don't ask for it because we don't think it's relevant. The other one, and we're going to have to get back with Nick about this one. I'll have to make sure it's right. The school safety and security report, we think actually was taken out in 2020. So there are a couple of them in there that are like that, where there's language in there that doesn't refer to anything that happens anymore. And so I think that's where some of the difference in how many required reports there are, because maybe we haven't been presenting a report that didn't have any information to report. So, we can but I think that's a great way to kind of just clean up everything anyway, just so that it's there. Couple of things on just so when we do reports, our goal is the first day of the legislative session, unless there is a different date or there's a reason why that date doesn't work. And so then on that, I would just point to, if you wanted to make a change, there's been some confusion about the tax credit scholarship for low-income students scholarship program, where in testimony, there's the Department of Revenue says it's $8.2 million, and we reported 7.9. Because we have to have that in by January 15th, we have to ask the Department of Revenue for the number before the end of the year. And so and we put on there that this is not complete, but if we didn't have to submit it until February 1st, we could wait till complete data from the Department of Revenue. So some of those kinds of things, people just didn't think about when they put that together. Yeah, we'd like to have it at the beginning, but we can't have complete data if that's the case. Some of the other ones, like the school district excess cost calculation that has to be done. That has to be done before we can send out any funding, special ed funding in the current year. We send out the first payment in October, which this group has had the conversation about why do we wait so long. We don't get the data to calculate it for the prior year until October 15th. So we use the previous year, so now it's 2-year-old data, and we sent it out last May so that we would have it done. If we move that date back, then we could use prior year data. So there are just a number of things like that that kind of kind of fit in there. The other thing I would say that the reports that take the most time for us and for school districts are going to be I'll look at Nick's list, the financial accountability report on school districts, and then also the academic achievement report with summary of longitudinal achievement. However, those kind of go into our core function, but that's what takes us the most time, and that's what takes districts the most time, but those are also the reports that get looked at the most, and those are the ones that are on Data Central. Some of these other ones, we don't post on Data Central. They could be available on our website. I mean, we did that with the district level excess costs last spring, but we don't really leave them out there. And then to the presentation, if it says to the legislature, we send it to the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House with the secretary and the clerk involved, and that's where it goes. If it's to a committee, we send it to the committee chair and typically the ranking, a lot of times chair, vice chair, and then the ranking member, and then include the committee assistant. So that's how we would submit them.
Questions, Representative Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On your best guess, how many of these produce useful data for you and your department?
So for us and for our department, I mean, again, the ones that take the most time, the accountability reports, the two different accountability, financial and student, I mean, those are the ones that do the most. When we look at our own list, one I didn't see on here was the early retirement incentives program. Is that on there?
Yes.
It was in the email, I remember.
We sent it in.
It's in here.
I didn't see it on Nick's list, but it might be there. That began in 2002. And when there was a lot of conversation about districts' early retirement programs, I don't think anybody's talked about that for years. It's on page 4.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Page 4, the second one down, I believe is what you're referring to. Well, that's the incentive program report.
So that's one of those ones where the school districts have to give it to us, and then we compile it and send it in. And that's actually quite a bit of work for school districts. It's not tons of work for us because we're just taking the information, 4 or 5 hours to put it all together and package it in a way that we send in. But I don't know that it's ever talked about. Now it goes to financial institutions, pensions, and whatever the rest of those committees are. So I don't know, because we don't follow those committees very often. One of the other ones I think it's on here is the Student Data Privacy Act report. We call it the longitudinal data system. What that is that if we add to the data we collect, we have to send it in. Now, what we've done is sent you our data dictionary. It's like 700 pages or something like that. But really all we have to report is any new data we are collecting. So not a big deal to do that. And we have to keep track of the data we're collecting anyway. Tax credit scholarship we talked about. The only issue with that one is we are required to report Department of Revenue and the scholarship granting organization data that we just have to ask them for and put in the report. We were getting questions about discrepancies. It's like, it's from the Department of Revenue, whatever they say is the right number. So some of those kinds of things are in there as well. Most of these reports don't take a lot of time for us, except for the ones that really are our core function. However, this is only my second legislative session, and when you get asked a question about data, or you get asked to provide data that was in a report you sent 2 weeks ago, it's hard not to say, hey, on page 5 of this report you already got. So I haven't said that very often, only once or twice. So, but it does make us question how much they're being used. But we also understand you get inundated with so much information. The other thing I would say is that it's not necessarily the reports that are here. We get lots of other requests. I mean, you typically go through KLRD and it's helping fulfill some of those requests that are the things we're not planning for that then take up staff time to get things done.
I'll come back to you. Representative Smoy was next, and then we'll go McDonald and then Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, since we're collecting the data anyway, what is the vetting process to determine what is public and remains public and what is only sent to the legislature?
So I guess the most thing would be is do we ever get questions about it other than from the legislature? Because if we're getting questions about it from somebody else and then we just post it out there, a lot of the reports, nobody else asks for the information, so we just don't do that. There are some reports, again, going back to district excess costs, where we have to send those to the districts, so we do that, so we put it up there. But yeah, a lot of times it's, if it's has to be published, then we do that. If it's something that I guess we think is going to be used by people or we get asked questions about, then we make it available on the website so we can just say, hey, go look here for that information.
Okay, can I have a follow-up? All right, so who, can regular Kansans contact you guys and ask for data that you're already collecting, or does that have to come through us?
So, we get data requests regularly. If it's like a report or something like that, then it's like, here you go, we'll just send it to them. We get enough of those, then we'll just post it. They can ask for other information. If it's not a regular report, then that request goes to our data governance board to determine whether that's information that we can release. And then because that would be additional work, it's like a public records request at that point. We try to just say, are you sure that's what you want? Does this do what you need? And before it's a lot of work and cost for them.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking at this tax credit for low-income students scholarship program report, and I know there are scholarship granting organizations. It talks about how many students, but I don't see, my understanding is they're a middleman. It doesn't really give an amount of money that they have made off of this low-income so-called scholarship program.
That would be information the Department of Revenue has.
Okay, thank you. I'll check with that.
Our part in that is that we determine if a student is eligible, and that's based on if they're over 7, did they attend a public school last year? If not, then they're automatically eligible. And then we do the income based on the information that the parent provides. After that, we don't know if they actually get a scholarship or how much that scholarship is for unless the SGOs report that to us.
Representative Estes.
Thank you. Dr. Harwood, if you could get us, including at least what's on here and anything else that you have, in other words, be as thorough as possible. Any suggested date changes, anything that you would like to notate as obsolete, and anything you would like to notate as useful is my first request. Then my second, if I may, Mr. Chair, is a question, which just sitting here thinking about, you guys are working on digital transfers of cumulative folders and also the longitudinal report. Are we kind of taking advantage of this opportunity to maybe automate some of the data gathering? Like if you wanted to count expulsions, let's say, or suspensions, and are we doing it in a way where you can auto-generate some of those numbers? Or is everybody going to use the same system?
So not everybody will use the same system, but their system is required to be able to transfer data. I mean, that's one of the requirements that they have to meet. And then so most of the school districts have contracts with their student information system vendors that if we add in another data element, they have to provide that at no cost. So they have to be able to add that in. So that happens over time. So with the new statewide longitudinal data system, KEDS, that we are implementing now, it's being built mostly to collect the data we've already been collecting. It can be expanded for other data as well. So I'll go back to Representative Brantley's question, and the bad thing is I don't know. I need to look at that bill. We are collecting some suspension and expulsion data, but it's only on a certain subgroups of students. That decision got made before I got here. We've unmade that decision. We're going to start collecting it again. With our new system, that we will set up a schedule for when that uploads. So it could be every night. Some data, I mean, state assessment scores doesn't make any sense to, well, one, we send it to them, so that doesn't make any sense anyway. But some doesn't make sense to upload every night. It just takes up bandwidth. Other things do. So like enrollment will be something we will get every night.
Thank you. So my follow-up question is, I hear us talking a lot more about different levels of measurement and not just the state assessments. Are you going to be able to have the longitudinal system talk to the digital cum folders and look at formative data and other data? Will we be able to see more of that, of course, with privacy protected? But I just kind of want to make sure that while we're doing this work, we've considered every possibility that will have us have great measurement. And if there's something we're not doing, why aren't we doing it? And what does it take for us to do it is the bottom line of my question.
So how we're building our new system is that each piece of data will be tied to a student, no matter where it resides in our system. So as long as that connection is there, then if there is a mini test score attached to a student, then it could be sent on to the next district. Again, we're starting with kind of the basics and then letting it build from there. The other thing I found out about this morning is evidently years ago, we put together a student file transfer portal where one district could request the cum folder from a district. They could scan it in and upload it, and it's like an FTP site. The next district would get it. Nobody uses it. And so instead, they are actually making copies of things and mailing them or faxing them, or somebody's carrying them. Hopefully, as we kind of get things more streamlined, it's okay. Here's the easy kind of the snapshot of what the student's been doing, and then you request the other part, and the districts take advantage of some things we already have. Now, and I say that because some of that whole cum folder thing it's never been digitized, and if that's the case, we can't do anything with it. If they upload it and make it part of the system and it's attached to a student, we could. So what I'm saying is that we're building the system to be able to do that. We're focusing right now on the implementation of making sure we can continue to do the things we have to be able to do, and then we can build from there.
Representative Estes.
Thank you for the indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Doing great.
We've talked about with DCF, and sometimes we're waiting on the receiving school to ask for that data folder. Will we be able to say, oh, we know that this child, would the sending school be able to push if for some reason that receiving school hasn't done it in the new system?
So the way the current file transfer is set up is that the receiving school makes the request. I don't know that we couldn't turn it around and do it the other way. The problem with that is then they'd still have to go in and actually go to the site and download it. But I think that's possible. It's just not the way this system is set up right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, most gracious chair. Frank, just anecdotally, I'm sure there's some that get more complaints than others. What is the most hated report out there?
So surprisingly, this year it was the foster care report card. Okay. But that's because we changed it. So, DCF asked for more data, so they wanted comparisons of state averages, which makes perfect sense. But when you have to reformat something and so it just took a long time to get it on there in a scale that you could actually read. So that was this year, but next year, as long as they don't change the report, now it's just run the report and it all works. So most of the complaints are when something changes. Mm-hmm. The other one, the statewide accountability report that is required to be on one piece of paper, so it says one page. We've actually said, well, a page has a front and a back, so you can print it on one piece of paper, but the report requires so much information that to comply with the space limitations, things are pretty small, and it takes time to put that together. So that's the kind of thing that mostly comes up. Most of them, the problem with a lot of these reports, they get done once a year. And so Gabrielle, who is usually here but not feeling well today, sets a calendar to then reach out to the people that have the data about 3 months before we need things done. And the report doesn't take that long to do, but but I only do it once a year, so that's getting it together. So most of the reports don't take more than 4 or 5 hours because it's data we already have. We just got to get it collected, formatted, sent out. Again, except for the accountability reports, but at some point we could talk about how we could streamline those, but those are always going to take a lot of our time because, again, they're core functions. So, that's most of them. Okay.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that small writing thing. I remember a biochem class that I got a 5x7 card to go into to exams, and you can write really small if you need to and put a lot on there. One other follow-up question, seriously, about that I kind of brought this up to Nick as well, but the amount of federal reporting that you do you have any kind of a list of that or an idea how it compares with what we have here?
There is a lot of overlap between the state and federal reporting, but we didn't ask the question. We can look at that and get it together. There is a lot of overlap between the two, and a lot of them are based on the other ones. Sometimes it's just a matter of how you have to package it. I will say one thing, and this is something we need to deal with, and so at some point you may get a request for funding for, the financial accountability reports, all of that is done with the most complex Excel spreadsheet I've ever seen. And so we have this really complex Excel spreadsheet that we send out to districts, and they put their things in, they send it back, and then we compile all of the data, including everything that goes on Data Central from that. That is probably, but the problem is that it goes back to the time when we were actually had people that they were mailing us things and we were doing it all just with paper, and then we had data entry people. And I mean, so it's evolved. And at some point it needs to evolve further. So, I mean, it works. And we have some people that can really do some pretty impressive stuff with Excel.
Do you have any of those set up that they're web-based so that they can just report on the web and then it automatically?
So the vast majority of our reporting is done through what we call our authenticated applications, which are all web-based.
Okay.
Yeah. We only have a few that aren't. And anything new that we build in with a web application. It's the things that have been, so we have so request federal payments. It's called Form 240. Found out not long ago, it's still on a mainframe. So it's just been there working for a long time. It's like, so we started to say, well, maybe we need to update that because at some point, some of the software we have to use is no longer supported. So it's like, okay, this is not okay.
Thank you very much.
But when things work, you have other things to do. You don't take the time to fix them. So.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you. Good job on my name. Do you have a rough idea of how much we've invested on your statewide longitudinal system so far?
So the two bigger grants are about $7 million. So $4 million is what was the basically the K-12 SLDS, and we're currently working on early child or pre-K one. The plan with that one is, and we're working with other agencies so that we can get a better picture of all of the different services that pre-K children have available. And so trying to get some of that done. So there were a couple, I asked the question this morning, there have been some other grants from the beginning, but the real development has been those two. That $4 million has already been spent, and the $3 million we're at 2023, so we got a couple more years on that one. So.
Thank you.
I have Representative Steele and then over to Representative McNorton.
I was asking about the federal, and Mr. Hill did that, so thank you.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Dr. Harwood, you talked, it's not a big report. It takes 3 or 4 hours. I'm assuming that's one employee, or is that multiple? I mean,
So it would be.
if they do it one, sort of explain, I mean.
So it would depend on the report. So some of it depends on who works with the data. So it may be one person then working with somebody else to get the data compiled and then put it together in a report that gets sent in. That would not be uncommon. In other situations where it's, our IT folks already have a script ready. All you got to do is change the year. Takes just a little bit of time and it comes over. So it kind of depends on the data and how it's housed. The more obscure the data or the more qualitative the data, sometimes the harder it is. Quantitative data is usually pretty simple.
Thank you.
Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just back to the 2 words, duplicated effort is just all over this. It makes me wonder, as you get your longitudinal system together, will there maybe even be a hybrid type report that so it's not duplicated again in the reports, that it could be accessed virtual?
So, yeah, well, so some of the ways we're going to cut down on the district's workload is right now with the KID system, they have to, they have to extract the information from their student information system and then upload it. And so it only happens, September 20th is the big one. Actually, doesn't happen until October 10th, but that's the big one. And so it gets uploaded and they do all the work. With the new system, basically the systems will be set up where they push the data on a regular basis. So as long as the scripts are set up and don't break, they won't actually have to do anything. It'll just it'll be automated. The only thing they would need to do is make sure their data is correct. Because one of the things that's positive about the process we have now is there's more I guess, data review. When you take that out, there'll be a lot less data review. And this is where you get into really odd situations. Data entry is always the problem where data goes bad the fastest. And it's somebody misspells something, leaves out, I mean, we've talked about leaves out a middle initial, doesn't capitalize the third letter of somebody that's like McNorton or McDonald's, things like that. So those are the things that cause problems. And then there's gonna have to be some of that review, but it will be much simpler at that point, that we don't have to keep asking for them to submit things. It'll already happen. Now, when it comes to the duplication between federal and state, it's the same data. The reports are different, so that's just a matter of pulling it up differently, moving on. But we're trying to decrease the amount of times districts have to submit things like that.
Thank you. And I could really see a lot of saving and being more efficient with FTE funding if we kind of take some time and look at these reports and find that duplication and maybe minimize
I think
it.
I mentioned this before, is that, so the reports that have like whole people's jobs attached to them are those accountability reports. And then what it is, these other reports become, hey, can you do this today? So most of these reports aren't an FTE. I mean, you put them all together, it's not a year-long FTE at all. It's other duties as assigned for the people that are already there for core function things. But efficiency is I mean, could it keep us from needing to add somebody else later on because now we've streamlined some of those other things to do? I mean, most likely, yes.
And I think you mentioned data analysis too. If you're not hands-on with the data, then you're going to have to incorporate those data analysis pieces into it. So, thank you.
A couple things I heard around these reports, and I'm kind of drawing a blank. It's a lot of reporting information. Where I want to go when we started to tie in to the FTE, would love to get your feedback from today on things requested and look at some of the redundancies that you would suggest, ways and changing dates, making things to where the reports that actually get to us can be used. I honestly, I like that things need to be, given to us during session, but it's probably the time that I have the least amount of time to read them. So, there's the ability to come have a conversation around that report, but it might be brand new information to most of us sitting here, and we're digesting it as it's being spoken to us rather than ahead of time. So I don't know that we can change that, but just food for thought. And the other one was, the one that Representative Hill's great question around which one is hated the most. Well, I heard, when you change something, that as far as then, and you're changing the system around how that is reported, and sometimes that needs to happen, and change is what it is. It's change. But, those new reports, those more reports, those changing a report, I wanted to echo that I heard that. And, FTE started to be talked about, and we've talked about this a little bit on the side, and I'll just make it, we would love to have a presentation on where are all 270 FTEs. What are they up to? How can we support them? Which ones are, in a sense, not being used because we were able to add in, a couple that weren't being used, just to be able to help wrap our minds around that what are that 270 doing, and almost what is the cost around those in different ways, duties assigned, that are tag-on things, but what are the main roles of each of those FTEs and the price tag that comes with it. It's kind of my request, and to have a conversation around that, because I think they tie together, but go ahead.
And so John Hess would be the person doing that, by the way. We've already had that conversation. I know he's thinking about it. I will talk to him again about time frame, and then when we can figure out what is a time frame when he could have something to present that works in a time that you can have a presentation. And then back to the other thing about the reports. So the other thing that we would think about is that some of the people that's like, this is something else that you do. Sometimes we try to do it in a time where they're down. I mean, they have a lull because, so the folks that do the financial accountability things, I mean, they are inundated in August, September, and October because that's when everything's happening. There are other people that, the assessment folks, well, we're kind of, that's kind of a, it was over, the assessments came in, we kind of have everything done. The reporting is done in September, so, that's a little different time. So we could look at when is the best time for us to put those reports together, when that information is ready, and then talk to you about when is the best time to get it.
Well, and the only response I have to that is, I mean, I think the Legislative Budgeting Committee also kind of changed things this year too, of the pace and the structure. And in that, when do we need to look at current information? I've even heard talks that it's possibly going to start to happen in December this next year, so that some of the collapsing in on these first 3 weeks to get something done, that we may, in order to stretch that out, we're going to have to go out and have some other meetings in December. So I don't know, just think around that and some of our suggestions of when we'd actually have time to digest this information, rather than the reports being done. And by the time we have made a decision on that portion of information, now we're on to the next year. That is not a great system. Maybe we can course correct it a little bit. I appreciate everybody's feedback. Oh, Representative Estes.
Just sitting here thinking about how do we measure without giving you another job to do, or the department another job to do, how useful people find their reports. And it occurred to me that we could post all the reports, and when we notify there is a report available, include the link, and we would kind of have a pretty easy indicator through the link open rate of how often people are looking at these reports. It's food for thought. The other one is, there are times in my, this is my 5th session, where there have been LPAs or times that we have asked you guys for information and you stand in front of us and say that a district didn't respond to you. Now that we are helping to reduce the burden and we are trying to automate as much as we can, what do you think is a reasonable response when a district doesn't respond to you guys or to us?
So I will say that the agency has been tremendously accommodating to districts that don't necessarily get things in on time. And so actually one of the things that and districts are busy. They've got, some districts, one person is doing 20 different things, so we understand that. But the other problem we have is that sometimes the delay of one district is holding up what we're doing for the other 285. And so we've actually started helping districts understand what their tardiness is doing for everyone else. So we are doing some of that especially with the financial accountability, because there are things that we can't calculate. So for example, the June special education payment, we can't calculate that until everybody gets all their staffing turned in. Well, that means if 2 districts haven't turned it in yet, we're still waiting, and people are waiting to see what it's going to be. So we're working on some of that. The other one that we've seen actually had to do with around surveys. So there have been legislative requests for us to collect information that we have to collect from districts. And I don't know if you've ever sent out a survey. Not everybody wants to answer the survey. And so I think it's different in what we're asking for. So if we send a survey to 286 districts and we get 260 of them back, depending on the survey, that's like, hey, that's pretty good. I mean, we kind of know what's going on. But there are other things, it's like if you have to have it in, we are taking steps to help people understand, I get that you have all kinds of things going on, but here are the consequences for everybody else if you don't have something in on time. So So we are moving those things up a little bit.
And they kind of might need to look at some of those surveys that same way. And I'll end there.
Thank you, everyone. Good opening discussion. We'll continue it. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Jennifer, for the stuff you did. Want to just highlight tomorrow and that making sure you saw the change in the schedule for the weather. Wednesday, we're all going sledding, it sounds like, and we may or may not be here. If we're here, we'll have committee and we may further this or see what we have gotten back on Wednesday, but I moved the Wednesday hearing for the Kansas State Longitudinal Data System hearing, moved it from Wednesday to tomorrow. So take a look at that tonight, and anybody who has testimony in on that is listening to this, if everybody would just double check on their oral and written testimony through Rose, and just make sure if you're emphatic that if you're wanting to be oral, that's where we're sometimes missing the clarity, is we get a lot of written testimony, and we have a lot of written testimony on this, but exactly who is wanting to be oral, make that crystal clear for us so that we don't miss anybody. With that, take a look at House Bill 2303. We'll go over that tomorrow in our hearing, and we are adjourned.